So recently I was thinking to myself, there's a lot of really great podcasts out there that are talking specifically about horror books. And I decided I would do an episode where I invite them to come on and talk to me about their podcasts. So as I was conceiving this, I invited a bunch of folks to come join me and talk. I did get to talk to four different folks about their podcasts. And I just composed a list of questions that someone who's a prospective listener to their podcast the things they might be curious about. So how many episodes they already have? How long are their episodes? What are some good ones to start with? Really general questions where if you were considering starting listening to a new podcast, things that you might want to know about. So I'm hoping that this is a good resource for people. But when I got people on to talk, podcasters are talkers. So what I thought was going to be 15 to 20 minutes per person ended up being a lot longer, which means this episode is now 2 episodes. In the first episode, you're going to hear Stephanie talk about her podcast, Books in the Freezer. And you're going to hear Michael David Wilson talk about his podcast, This is Horror. And then on the second one, which I'm going to post back to back, you're going to hear Neil McRobert talk about his podcast, Talking Scared. Max Booth is going to talk about their podcasts, Ghoulish and Dog Ears, and a little bit of another one as well. And then at the very end, tagged on, just in case you showed up to listen to this from some other podcast besides mine, you'll have me doing a quick explanation of what my podcast is typically and what you can expect from that. So 5 different podcasts, but there are so many podcasts out there, so many great podcasts talking about horror. So if I wasn't able to talk with someone on the podcast, on my Substack post for these episodes, I did include a pretty big list of other horror-focused podcasts that were recommended to me from social media. So I put out a call and I said, hey, who are the horror book podcasts that you listen to most, or that you enjoy most, or that you recommend to other people? And from that list, I gathered information, links and descriptions and everything, and put that together as a longer list on the website. So you'll hear from these 5 podcasts, including myself, in the 2 episodes, but then I'm looking at the post as something of a live list that as more information shows up, I will update. So if you're listening to this and you're reading that list and there's something that is glaringly absent from my kind of compilation of horror book podcasts, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I will add it to the list. I will post about it on social media, because really the goal of all of this is giving people an opportunity to discover something new and expand their knowledge about what horror books are out there, what's being recommended, hear from the authors, know what's coming up in the future. So the more voices that you can hear talking about that, the better. So if the way that Max Booth talks about stuff connects with you better, I want people to listen to Max. If people really enjoy the way that Neil conducts his interviews, I want people to talk to Neil. Stephanie has got a great thing going on where it's much more interactive, and it's kind of like co-hosting with her guests. So if that's the kind of thing that you like, please, I want people to discover stuff and find new ways to connect with books and authors. That's what this is all about. Again, if you feel like I missed something, reach out to me. I will add it to my list. Nobody was left off intentionally. It's just hard to create a perfect list of anything. So thank you for listening. The next thing you're going to hear is me talking to Stephanie about Books in the Freezer. And then following that, you're going to hear Michael David Wilson. And again, in the second part of this, it'll be Neil McRobert, followed by Max Booth, followed by myself.
Well, I am Stephanie Gagnon, and I host the Books in the Freezer podcast.
Awesome. So we're going to start out just with some quick speed round answers. I was talking with people about if you were just about to learn, or you were looking to learn about new podcasts, what information might be useful. And so these are some of the quick things that I thought might be helpful if someone's trying to get introduced to a new podcast. So first of all, how long ago did you start doing this podcast?
Oh, October 2017.
You're a veteran now.
Been in the game for a while.
A lot of them are pandemic born,
Yeah.
so you predate the pandemic. How many episodes have you gotten to?
193. We do every
Oh.
other week. So.
Yeah, congrats. I used to do a weekly podcast for a long time, and it's a grind. And I was like, I'm just going to slow it down.
For me, it just was not sustainable.
Yeah. All right. So every other week. About how long do you target your episodes to be?
Between an hour to 90 minutes. I feel like we have a lot of segments, so
yeah,
that tends to be where we're at.
My goal is always an hour, and it's always way more than that.
Yeah.
And then as far as the format people can find you in, is it just audio? Is it audio, video, any or both, or what?
It's just audio.
Okay, cool. So like all the podcast streams kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you do, and I know the answer, but I have to ask it like I don't, Patreon or like support through Substack or bookshop.org affiliate thing or anything like that?
Yeah. I do have a Patreon, like a few levels on there. And then I have a few affiliate links like Libro FM and Fangoria.
Mm-hmm. And then people would just find that like on your website or?
Yeah, on the show notes website, just booksinthefreezer.com. All the like links to everything are in there.
Cool. For anybody listening, I will have links in my show notes for the audio podcast, but also YouTube. It'll just be up on the screen. So you kind of mentioned it, but do you do additional content beyond what's in the main podcast feed?
I mean, I have like bonus like Patreon episodes, but not really like that. I have stuff on like social media, like series and things I'll do on there, but basically mostly the podcast.
It's primarily okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have like a special different series on the Patreon or anything like that. I know some people do that where it's like a different themed episode kind of thing.
I've done like things here and there, but not recently. I do have some like bonus episodes ready to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I threw this one on after sending you my list. So this is a surprise one. What social media are you most active on?
Definitely Instagram.
Yeah.
Instagram is my top. And then I used to post on TikTok a lot. So I was like, man, TikTok's probably my second.
I have found, I was listening to I can't remember I was listening to something, and Facebook was one of the social medias that they listed. And I realized I never even bothered to set up Facebook presence for this podcast, because I just find it to be I barely even look at it. So I don't know. But yeah, I find Instagram to be really engaging.
Yeah. I feel like Instagram is a great place for readers. Like there's a big Bookstagram community and people looking for this type of content I found on Instagram.
Yeah.
But with Facebook, I just connected it to my Instagram. So when I post on Instagram, it just cross posts to Facebook. So I don't have to think about it.
Yeah. And then there's that Threads thing where.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
How are we supposed to keep up?
It's like I have lots of these social media accounts, but then I'm like, oh, I forgot to do this one for the last several weeks. So I found like Instagram is the hub of activity for me. All right. So that was just kind of the quick answer stuff, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper. You mentioned you had different like segments and stuff. So what's the general, if someone's starting to listen to you for the first time, what's the general format they can expect to experience?
Yeah. So general format is they are themed episodes. It's a book recommendation podcast. So it's usually a guest and we're recommending books under a specific theme, like let's say vampires or New York. And sometimes it's an author promoting like their upcoming book. So we'll talk about that up top. And like, let's say for New York, I talked to Nat Cassidy. So we talk about like New York horror movies. And then we talk about like New York horror books. And usually each of us pick 3 books that we're bringing to recommend that fall under that umbrella. And then Books in the Freezer is a Friends reference to Joey putting The Shining in the freezer. So that is the like scariness scale we use when recommending books. Like if it's a really scary book, we'd say like, oh, it's a freezer book, or, this is room temperature. This is fridge.
Funny story about that. I was talking with Josh Malerman. I did this crazy thing where I went and spent a weekend at his house, and we just recorded like hours and hours of audio. And I was just mentioning other horror podcasts and everything. And so I mentioned yours, and he said, "Is that a reference to Friends?" And I had no idea. And he's like, so it's probably on, I think it's audio on one of the episodes, but he was explaining how, he put it in the freezer. And I was like, well, that's got to be it. But I never really cared for Friends, so I didn't watch, even though I've had a phone conversation with David Schwimmer.
Really?
One time. But never really paid attention to Friends too much. But I'm so happy that it's that it seems like it's a really recognizable concept. Like why? So you wouldn't. It would be a really weird thing if it was a deep cut. No one would understand if you called it Books in the Freezer. But the what do you call it? Like the podcast art that you have is like the shining carpet or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably helpful too. Putting those two things together and figure it out. So, and then I guess following up on the authors coming on and talking things. So it's not necessarily always that a person is coming on to promote a book that's coming up. It's but sometimes that's the case. Is that right?
Most of the time, yeah.
The ones that I've listened to were all you had some conversation about their upcoming thing, but
yeah. Sometimes I have friends that collaborate a lot when I want to do like my weirder, more niche episodes.
Well, that's always good. That's always good to have those clutch people who are just going to do what you tell them to, or indulge those things. I have my Stephen Graham Jones nuts that we do like deep dive episodes. I know I can count on them to know way too much about the books. So, and then in general, you said it's a book recommendation podcast. I'm assuming that leads into my question about like, what's the mission of the podcast? Is the goal to just bring awareness about books to people, or what's the bigger mission?
I mean, to help people find a horror book that they want or hadn't heard about before going into it. I mean, when I started this in 2017, this was before this big horror resurgence that we've been seeing. Mm-hmm. And I would listen to a lot of book podcasts, and I felt like they were dismissive of horror, or they kind of mentioned the same 3 books. And I was someone who was a very passionate reader and was like, there's so much to the genre. There is so much more than just these 3 authors. And so that was essentially the mission of the show, to help people that maybe wouldn't call themselves a horror reader find a book they would like, or someone who was a horror reader, learn about a book that pick up a book they wouldn't have thought to pick up because of the show.
I love that. Do you find that so you've been doing this 7 years now. Have you ever found that you've been in a place where you're like, I've been talking about this for so long and finally it's catching on? Like, have you ever been like the, I knew way before it was cool kind of person?
I feel like definitely now that you say that, I'm like, I know I've felt this, and now I'm trying to think of like what that is. Well, I've kind of felt that way with like Stephen Graham Jones. Like I was here since like Mongrels, like the beginning of the podcast, and now he's really having his moment. And we're like, we were here.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And this is not to one up you, but I first interviewed Stephen in 2011.
Wow.
And have read basically everything he's put out since 2011. And to see that. And Paul Tremblay would be another one for me, where I knew Paul. I started doing podcasts about books in 2011, so I met a lot of people back then. So to see them get the recognition you've been hoping is a really fun thing. Do you have, and I know I kind of gave this to you last minute, but do you have kind of some specific episodes that you would recommend to people who are new listeners for you?
Definitely. I actually reached out to my listeners about this, say like, what is an episode you would recommend to beginners? A lot of people said the one I mentioned earlier, New York City horror with Nat Cassidy. I've recently done a few like pop culture read-alike episodes. So I did like Twilight Zone read-alikes with Rachel Harrison, where we would pick like Twilight Zone episodes and pair them up with a book that had like similar vibes. And then Brian McCauley and I just did one for Goosebumps books. So we pick like Goosebumps books and pair them to like adult horror novels.
That's great. that's a cool idea. Because really what you're just doing is like drawing connections. Like if this is your vibe, here's some other stuff that is probably also your vibe. I like that a lot. I did listen to the Nat Cassidy one. That guy is so easy to listen to. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I talked to him last year for when Nestlings came out. Never met the guy before. We talked for almost 3 straight hours.
Oh my gosh.
And he's just, endlessly fascinating. Yeah.
He is, and he's very easy to talk to. I do feel bad. When we recorded that episode, I had some type of awful cold. So he would be talking and I was just muting my mic, like hacking along.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm listening. I hear you. But I was so
great.
sick. Thank you.
I think that his film background probably helps out with like the conversation too, because he knows a lot about film and everything.
Yeah.
And like playwright. I don't think that there's like a medium that he hasn't become some sort of expert in. So it's kind of annoying in a way. Great. Then, do you have any kind of memorable or unexpected moments in your podcast? Not necessarily like things that happened while you were recording, but like unexpected, awesome, crazy things that happened in relation to your podcast that you can think of?
I actually looked at this one. I was like, I really tried to think of something. And maybe it's because I was thinking of things that have happened while recording.
Yeah.
But I had a hard time.
It can be. I mean, it can be something that happened while recording. Like, but
do you have one?
I can say this now because he's no longer around. But one time I was interviewing an author who basically said without saying that he had murdered someone.
What?
And so that's going to be hard to top. It was a guy who had previously been in jail, and while he was in jail, bad stuff happened. So I was like, do you want me to cut that out? He let it stay in. So it's out there for people to listen to, but he passed away a little while ago. So,
okay.
So, but that's
to the grave.
Yeah, he got away with it, I guess.
Yeah,
he got away with murder. But that's the reason that I made that question, because I was like, there's got to be situations where someone throws you a curveball that you just weren't expecting. But
no, I feel like everyone's stayed pretty on topic, and it's like the most exciting stuff is like, they'll hint at like upcoming book news or like possible movie news that you can't talk about. But,
yeah. Do you ever get scoops that you have to like keep under wraps? Yeah. That's fun. That's really fun when you're like, oh, I know about a movie option or some cool thing like that.
Yeah. When they're like, cut that out. You're like,
yeah. Yes. And then but then it feels so cool when you're like, I knew about that, and everybody's freaking out. How about like a bucket list guest? Is there anybody that you would, and I know that probably a lot of people are going to have an obvious answer, but is there anyone that you would just love to talk to?
Oh my God. Yes. My bucket list guest is Gillian Flynn.
Oh, cool.
Author of Gone Girl.
Yeah.
That was a book that got me back into reading, and truly like every novel she did after that, I felt like was like 5-star perfection. And I know she's started her own like imprint. So I would just love to talk to her.
Oddly, since I live outside Chicago, and so does Daniel Krauss, when he was doing promo for Whale Fall, he did an event in Chicago, and the person who was the like in conversation with person was Gillian Flynn, because she's also a Chicago person. So she was fascinating. And then I was thinking, poor Daniel Krauss, everybody's just going to want to talk to Gillian Flynn and like ignore him on his book release. But she was really cool, and just like she really just worked into being part of the thing instead of being like this big celeb author. So that was cool. Yeah, I gotta imagine she'd be super fascinating to talk to.
She would.
Yeah.
It would be one of those episodes where you're just like pacing back and forth before hopping on. You're like,
okay. Have you had that situation? Because I was talking to one time Michael David Wilson, and he had that with a couple of guests, like he had Chuck Palahniuk and he had, I
Yeah.
think, Dean Koontz or something. And when you have those high, big star names, you tend to just like, first of all, panic a lot, but also like try to be as prepared and perfect as possible. Have you had that kind of situation?
I mean, definitely. I think the first time I talked to Stephen Graham Jones, that was a pacing day. That was
Yeah.
the first time I talked to Grady Hendrix, the first time I talked to
Yeah.
Paul Tremblay, especially because Paul Tremblay, A Head Full of Ghosts is like one of my favorite books of all time. And he came on, I was just like asking him a million things. And I was like, I feel like a crazy fangirl.
Yeah, yeah. But then you find that all of the people that you mentioned are just the sweetest,
They're
nicest
so
people.
nice.
It's like, and I can't say one is more nice than the other. So they must have. Hopefully they made it easy for you because there's great folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to. One person I'd really like to talk to is Katrina Ward.
Yeah.
Because if you ask me, no one is writing at the level that she's writing at. It's insane.
She knows how to write a twist. She knows how to just like have you and you think you know what's going on and then you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely the authors that I don't try as hard to get on my podcast because I'm like intimidated by them.
Yeah.
She's on that list. So yeah, because I'm like, ugh.
I met her at StokerCon too. And as you can imagine, very nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Totally. Yeah. There's honestly, and you probably have this similar experience with the people that you talk to. That's almost always the case.
Yeah.
The only times I've had people where I'm like, that guy didn't like me. I talked to Todd Kiesling, and I think that he's just, quiet person, but I took it as, oh, that guy didn't like this conversation. But then I've heard him on other things, and it was the same thing, and I was like, okay, oh. So yeah,
that happened with me with an author, and then I saw him interact at StokerCon, and he kind of had that same demeanor, and I was like, okay, so it wasn't just me. It wasn't that he just like really did not want to talk to me. This is truly just how he interacts with the world. Okay.
Yeah. So that all of that internalized like, oh, they don't like me just vanishes. Yeah. But yes, absolutely. I think for the most part, almost everybody that I've talked to in horror is super sweet and super nice and approachable and fun.
Yeah. It's funny, so many like high energy extroverted people writing horror, which I think people who aren't horror fans would not suspect that.
Yeah. Josh Malerman is one of the most positive and like wide-eyed, like he's got this childlike kind of awe about things that of people I've met. He's definitely like, he's been accused of toxic positivity, I think, from time to time because he just comes on and he's like, everything's great and everything works out. And I think some people don't like the vibe, but like, it's because he genuinely is just always so excited about everything.
That is, yeah. I mean, from what I've seen from him online, that is the vibes he's given out. I feel like him, like Clay McLeod Chapman, like Brian McCauley, just like very upbeat, extroverted people.
Yeah. Which is great. I mean, it makes you want to. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to the people of our ilk too. First of all, because I feel like horror podcasters are more or less the same way. Maybe a little more broody, but still very positive, still excited about things and enthusiastic and stuff like that. Then I guess kind of a final question. Do you have kind of a goal for growing your podcast, or are you pretty happy with the kind of things that you, because like I'll preface this with a little story. Like the previous podcast I used to do, I wasn't like, ooh, I need to get to a certain number of followers, or, oh, I have to do this, or I have to make it, earn me this amount of money. I was just having fun talking to people, and I didn't really care to evolve it too much. And I think that's absolutely valid. It was just a way for me to enjoy the thing I enjoy. But I know some people really are trying to like push to another level. So I guess, do you fall in either of those camps at all?
I definitely do this for fun, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't looking at those download numbers and hoping that like I'll hit that million download mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah. And it's tough. I mean, you know how it is. You get stuck on these numbers and checking follower counts and checking engagement, and it is just a whole thing you can spend so much time and energy on.
Yeah. It can get in your head.
It can. It
For
truly
sure.
can.
I saw recently a couple of podcasts that I won't name being like, oh, if I get to 10,000 followers, I'll do this. And I'm like, help a guy get to his first K. Like, that would be nice. So yeah, it can kind of, there is the possibility of feeling like, is what I'm doing actually like having an impact or not?
Yeah. No, I mean, it is just how it is. And I know, like, I have friends who started podcasts like way after mine who are now at like multiple million downloads. So it's tough not to play that comparison game. So
yes. But what I have found, and I'm wondering if it's the same for you, is that the real gratification is when you hear like cool feedback about something.
Yes.
Like, and I don't get a lot of feedback from listeners very often. But when someone validates, like when someone says something where you're like, if I didn't make this thing, they wouldn't have that feeling. Like that is where I think I get the most happiness. So is that kind of your experience too?
Definitely. People reaching out after an episode saying they either, picked up a book because it was mentioned on the episode and loved it, or connected with something that we talked about. I think that's the best. And also, yeah, I think of all the mediums podcasting, I don't think we hear as much from the listeners because it's not like YouTube where you can just like comment what you're thinking. So, but listeners, we do like to hear from you.
We love it.
We love to get an email. We love to get comments on the episode posts.
Yeah. The more feedback, and that's the thing, the more feedback we get, the more we can kind of use that to, guide us. Like if we don't know we're doing an awful thing that's turning people away from us, can't change that awful thing. And I do get the most interaction on my episodes on YouTube. So it is like, I do get, feedback that way, but otherwise, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a quiet place to be.
I originally did booktube videos, like book videos for YouTube. So that was an adjustment too, that I wasn't hearing back from people as much.
Yeah. And I'll wrap it up with a bonus question that I just thought off the top of my head. What's got you most excited about horror right now?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I mean, it's just like
I sprung it on you. I'm sorry.
I think what I'm loving right now is that there's these like well-loved tropes like vampires, but there's all these masterful authors just taking them in such new and interesting directions that I would not have thought possible. And I think just being able to go into a bookstore and see like dedicated horror sections, see curated horror end caps, to see that it's a part of the mainstream now. It's a part of the conversation.
100%. I totally agree with both of those things. That's the tropes being used in unique ways is a topic of conversation a lot for me right now when I'm talking to authors. And it's so refreshing because it used to be like, oh, great, another zombie novel. Oh, great, another zombie novel. And it was just the same thing. But now people are using that as a base to say something that's more important or more personal or more whatever it happens to be. So I love that. And then to the other point that you made, Paul Tremblay debuted on the New York Times bestselling list with Horror Movie. His first week, he was on the New York Times bestsellers list. Wow. That's astonishing to me.
Yeah.
Like I can't even fathom like that, a horror author that's not Stephen King or Dean Koontz or whatever debuted on the New York Times bestselling list. There's definitely like momentum in horror. I totally agree.
Yeah. And it's exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have been here a while. Like it's exciting to see.
It really is. It really is. So what, assuming that you probably listen to some other horror podcasts, what are some of your favorites?
Oh man, I love. I mean, I'm friends with Agatha, so the She Wore Black podcast is one that I love, and she's a big like horror romance person, and it's interesting because it's so many things like I was not aware of, and she's just so knowledgeable,
Mhm.
and she has fun guests. They have great conversations. Got another friend, Neil, at Talking Scared. He just has these masterful interviews with people, and you can tell he just has such a way with people where he makes them feel so comfortable, and they just really do have these great in-depth discussions.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Trevor at Slay House too.
Yeah,
It's another one I really like.
well, Stephanie, thanks so much for taking a quick moments to share about your podcast. I really enjoy listening to it. You mentioned the Nat Cassidy one. I love that one. And I do recommend people start maybe there too. And anybody listening or watching, I definitely encourage you to check out Books in the Freezer. You have so many episodes to choose from, so there's a lot. Like that's one of the things where like you can like, oh, I now like this podcast and I'm catching up, but when I need something else, I can go back and listen to the older ones. So plenty of stuff to check out. So yeah, thanks so much for agreeing to do this with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for reaching out.
I'm Michael David Wilson, and I am the host and founder of This Is Horror podcast.
OG stuff. I want to say probably the longest running horror podcast that exists right now, maybe with the exception of like stuff maybe like Pseudopod or something like that, or something I'm not thinking of. But like you're in a rare position as far as like your longevity in the field.
Yeah, I think we're definitely the longest running horror interview show for whatever that is or isn't worth. We've been going now since February 2013, so over 11 years.
That's insane. And that was my first question, so you just fed right into that. And now, how many episodes at the time of recording? How many episodes have you done?
Well, we have 578 regular episodes, but if you include some occasional bonuses and previews that we've put out, according to the Apple Podcast app, there are 592.
That's insane. It's completely insane. I did a thing back when I was hosting Booked where I used to kind of keep track of how many hours total. I had a spreadsheet, so I knew how many hours total podcasts I'd put out. And I'd calculate it into like, at some point, at a point it reached, you'd have to listen to the podcast for more than 3 straight weeks uninterrupted to get through everything. So you're probably creeping up on a month, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible when you think about it that way. And then when I think how many, not just hours of my life, how many months of my life, potentially years, have I dedicated to doing this? I mean, even just considering the editing and putting the episodes up, this is before we consider actually prep and reading the books to interview everyone.
Yeah, you've got your Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours for sure. Easily. Yeah. So, all right. But talking about episodes and time, this is an interesting one because you are notoriously record very, very long conversations, but that is different than your episode length. So what's your goal, like your target episode length in general?
So each episode we go for about an hour. And I mean, I came up with that through just looking, over a decade ago now in terms of like listener attention span and when people might be intimidated by just how long a podcast is. So 1 hour seemed about the sweet spot. And we do sometimes have conversations that are 2 or 3, very occasionally 4 hours. So then we'll just split that into 2, 3, or 4 episodes. So each episode we go for about an hour, but probably when you include the introduction and the outro, I guess it's about 1 hour 10, 1 hour 15, but around that hour mark seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree. Um, the thing I like about that approach is that you don't have to like rush yourself to get to all the questions. Like if you're breaking this up into, you're giving yourself as much time as you need to for the conversation to be what it needs to be, and then just making the appropriate amount of episodes to support like a reasonable amount of listening. So yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, because I mean, the This Is Horror podcast is very much a conversation rather than an interview. I feel if we just wanted a quick fire interview, then maybe a magazine or a website is a better format for that. But the real benefit of the podcast is being able to eavesdrop into two people having a meaningful connection and a meaningful conversation. I think, over the years, the people who are best at that, so like, we're talking about outside the genre, people like Tim Ferriss and the WTF podcast as well with Mark Maron. These are all, it's like you're there, you're part of the conversation. And if
Yeah.
I've just got a list of questions, then yeah, that's an interview. That's not a conversation. But the art of podcasting, I think, is to be dynamic, to respond to what's actually being said, with the caveat being that as the interviewer, as the host, you want to say as little as possible. You're facilitating information from the guest.
Yeah, that's always been my goal is like the less I'm talking, the better it's going is kind of my general guiding principle, I'd say, for when I'm talking to people. Because yeah, I'm not going to give myself, I don't have the kind of ego where it's like people clicked on this to listen to me. It's like, no, they wanted to hear what Josh Malerman has to say about his new book. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Getting through these quick questions. I know the answer to this, but for anybody who is new to you guys, audio or video or what formats are your episodes available in?
So for the almost 600 episodes, we've always been available as audio. And then a few years ago, we started putting up videos for the vast majority of episodes. So if you go to youtube.com/ at This Is Horror Podcast, you can get video versions as well. And I think doing that has led to the, well, I suppose we can't say listenership, but the viewership and the growth of the audience in general. Because when you've got the podcast available in a different format on YouTube, then you're bringing in new potential people who, maybe they don't listen to podcasts. So I
Yeah.
think it's a great opportunity to spread the word about This Is Horror.
In another conversation I had with a different podcaster, the interaction is different on in YouTube too. Like you get a lot, at least my experience is you get a lot more comments and people talking about it as opposed to like when you send out an audio episode onto the podcast feeds, like it's just kind of lost in the ether. There's not as much direct interaction. So from my experience, the thing I've benefited greatly from on YouTube is being more connected with people who are getting it that way.
Yeah. Although I
Yeah.
certainly understand why people wouldn't put it on YouTube. I mean, I don't know exactly what episode we started, but probably the first 400 plus episodes we were not on YouTube, or at least not in video format. And I mean, as a creator, the disadvantages of YouTube are, one, you've got a much bigger time investment to then add another additional thing that you have to do. And also, I mean, it could add a layer where perhaps the guest is a little bit more self-conscious
Mm-hmm.
because now they're thinking about the aesthetic presentation as well as the audio. And it can logistically mean that if like This Is Horror, we always say we will edit out anything that you don't want included. well, then that can make it much more of a logistical nightmare to piece that together if there's a lot that people don't want to go into the final episode. And, that's why I say for the vast majority they're available in video, because there are some where the editing has taken so long that there's been a massive delay. Occasionally there's a technical issue with the video that would then make it take, possibly tens of hours to get ready. And,
Yeah.
But I think it depends what you're trying to do and what your target is. The audio at the moment is our main audience, and that is
Right.
what we're trying to do. But the video is bringing in new people, particularly if we get a big name guest like Chuck Palahniuk or Dean Koontz, and there are people just searching for videos of them generally, but they're not searching for podcasts of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had the same experience. Let's talk about like listener support. Some people do Patreon, some people do Substack subscriptions, other people have affiliate. They have affiliate agreements with affiliate links to Amazon or bookshop.org. So what are the opportunities for listeners to support This Is Horror podcast?
Well, the main way to support us is patreon.com/This Is Horror. And as people who listen to the podcast regularly will know, because I plug it at the end of every episode. So in the outro, the main benefits there are you get early bird access to each and every episode. You get to submit questions to the interviewee. And there are also a number of bonus podcasts, including Story Unboxed, the horror podcast on the craft of writing. We've got Q&A sessions with myself and Bob Pastorella. And we've got On Camera Off Record, the video cast. I think, though, probably because when I set up anything, I try to think, what would I like? And I think the main perk when I was starting out was just the opportunity to submit questions to everyone we're interviewing. I listen to a load of other podcasts, in areas where I'm not a professional and I'm not known, like health and fitness, I suppose, being the main ones. I'd love the opportunity to submit questions to all of the guests that they get on each of those podcasts. So that's like the big perk that we have. So if there's a writer that we're going to interview and you want to ask them something, then you can submit to them. We will ask them anything. There has not been anything yet that we've decided not to ask them, but perhaps someone like Max Booth will now challenge that with an outrageous question. But yeah.
Well, you'll get your money first. So
there you go. Yeah, got to get paid. Patreon.com/This Is Horror. And, another way that people can support me personally is to buy my books, as well as being a podcaster. I'm a writer. I would say that is primarily what I do. So I've got a number of books, including The Girl in the Video, House of Bad Memories, and then with my podcast co-host Bob Pastorella, They're Watching.
I will. People are already seeing it on the screen because I love to put book covers on the video. So if you're in the audio, you're missing out. But because you have beautiful covers for your books.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing I'd say too, just in case this applies to anybody that's listening, you do advertising blocks on your episodes. So if you're an author trying to promote your book, if you're a publishing house trying to get the word out, or anything that you think horror, fans would want to hear an ad for, like that's another thing that you do too. So not everybody does those. I've never done ads, just because like I've just been too lazy to, but it really is like the ads that I hear on your episodes are like super relevant. They're dialed into the type of people who interact with the podcast anyway. So it's not like you're doing like Blue Apron or something like that, or like Blue Chew or one of the other blues. It's actually relevant to to horror in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was very deliberate. And I mean, I wanted different ways to monetize the podcast because it is a huge time investment, and advertising is a way. But I decided early on, if I'm going to do this, then the ads are going to be targeted. Again, we're talking about adding value. We're talking about giving. What would I want if I'm going to hear advertising? I want it to be relevant to something I might actually purchase. So we're
Yeah.
not advertising mattresses. We're not advertising therapy. Some people advertise therapy. What else do they advertise? Like, I was going to say we're not advertising wine subscriptions, but actually maybe that's a missed opportunity. Wine and
That
books,
could
they
fit,
go
yeah.
pretty well. But we have a range of different options for people who want to advertise. And, we've had anything from mainstream publishers like Penguin and HarperCollins, Simon and Schuster taking out a number of months from like an indie self-published author, but taking out one advert. So there are a range of options depending
Yeah.
on your budget and your size, but we're trying to spread the word and make sure that it's relevant. And every month, I mean every week really, I get emails from totally irrelevant companies trying to ask me, do I want to run some advertising on the website or the podcast? But it's just not really serving our audience. And so many of these, you can tell that they're templates as well, because they say, we love what you're doing. We think you'd be a great fit for running this advert on this bikini. Well, do you? Why do you think that? Is this just a way to get me into a bikini? Is this what you're doing here? Because I think that could heavily backfire. I don't think that's anything that anyone needs to see.
Oh, my prank bikini thing didn't work. You
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
through
you've been rumbled. It was you all along.
it. But
Yeah,
no, the thing that I like about your ads is that they're ads that make sense for the content and for the audience. So
yeah.
shifting gears a little bit, this is one that I think is probably more important than I thought about when I wrote the question down. But what social media are you most active, or I guess active on? But like, where do you kind of like default to?
It's definitely Twitter, now rebranded as X. That's where we've got the most followers. That's where I put the most posts up. And I mean, I think particularly in the last year or year and a half, social media has got a lot more fragmented and tumultuous, particularly after the buyout of Twitter by Elon Musk. And so I feel before we had different hubs where people were, and now, you'll hear of companies and brands and podcasts and writers that they're posting on 10 different social
Mm-hmm.
media platforms. But, my job is not to post on social media platforms. So I try to simplify it. And so we are mostly on X. That is where you're going to get the most engagement from us. Choose one and use that one. That's my time hack.
I see the wisdom in that, because you, instead of spreading yourself too thin doing the same thing in 10 places, maybe do more in one place. I was listening to someone give their like, how do you reach me online kind of thing on a podcast, and they said, well, I'm on X. And to me it kind of sounded like they were talking about doing drugs. Like, do you think that that's been something that, or is it just me being pedantic or whatever? Like, I'm on X. It kind of sounds like you're on ecstasy or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it totally sounds like you're on ecstasy. It's like I'm on X. It's like, yeah, I didn't ask what drug you're on at the moment.
Hey,
What
well, drink
social
some water
media
and tell me
platform?
what social media. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I drank some water. All right. That's my dumb joke. I got through it. We'll go into the kind of like the meteor questions now. So, not questions about meteors, meteor questions.
Yeah, I'm
For
not
anybody,
sure I'm the right guest for that, but I'll field any question, as is the perk for patrons with the Q&A sessions. So, what you got?
I wouldn't even know where to start with that, to be honest with you. But like, so for anybody who's new to listening to you, what is the general format of your podcast? Like, if someone started listening to an episode, what would they expect to hear?
So, when we're talking to a guest for the first time, as you said before, we'll typically talk for 2 hours, and then, as standard, the first hour of the first time speaking to someone, we will be almost having a "this is your life" kind of conversation. I like to start with early life lessons growing up. They don't have to pertain to writing or horror, just anything that was of note or was interesting during those formative years. And then for that first hour, I'm almost going chronologically through their career.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at, what made you write in the first place? What were the horror movies and the horror books that you were getting into? What was your gateway drug into horror? So it's very much, as we said before, the antithesis to the quick fire
Right.
Q&A interview, because I want to get to know the person. It isn't just about getting to know the books. If you want to just know about the book, you can read the book. You can read it again and again. But I want to know, who you are as the person we're interviewing, what makes you tick, what have been some of your struggles. And I know that we're going to jump into this, probably the next question, in terms of what we're doing, what the mission is. But I think it pertains to what I'm saying here, which is, I mean, we got a review recently saying that they felt that This Is Horror podcast manages to educate and entertain them, and that is exactly what we're trying to do, because we want people to become better writers. We want them to become better people. We're not suggesting that they need to, but if you've got some life
Right.
lessons along the way. But then we also want you to have fun. So we're trying to, walk that line between education and entertainment, and hopefully the humor and the kind of jokes that I will throw in. And it's like I'm not afraid to make a light-hearted dumb joke, but I'm also not afraid to ask a really dark, deep, and very personal question. And so I think that's probably the unique selling point. So first hour is getting to know the person. The second hour, which is typically the second episode, is when we dig a bit deeper into the books, the films, and the art of the person that we're talking to. If we're interviewing someone for a subsequent time, then we'll typically start off finding, okay, how have they grown? What have they learned since we last spoke to them? Because we're always evolving, we hopefully, as human beings. And then we might have more room for a deep dive into their books and a discussion as to their work after. But I mean, sometimes the hardest interview can be when we're interviewing someone for the first time and they are a prolific, or they are a legend
Yeah.
of horror, particularly if, and it can happen quite often with the first interview, we're told, let's cap it at an hour, or let's cap it at
Yep.
90 minutes. So, I mean, the other day we were talking to Sandy King Carpenter, Now, she
Mm-hmm.
is the film producer of Storm King Productions. She's the first female found comic book company, Storm King Comics. She's also the wife of the legendary John Carpenter. So they worked together on a number of films, including They Live and Vampires and Village of the Damned, Prince of Darkness. So we had about 90 minutes with her, and it's like, goodness, how on earth
Right.
do I even do this? So, we did the typical format that we do, but it's that there's always a feeling like, should I have gone deeper on the specific books or films? But for that first interview, I want to give you a preview of
Mm-hmm.
who we're talking to. Then perhaps later we can have a specialist kind of deep dive on a film, on a specific comic, on a specific book. And I'm sure different authors and writers and creatives react differently to it. I mean, Sandy King Carpenter must have been interviewed a bunch of times, but I bet in her interview she's not had someone for the first half an hour just trying to find out about their childhood and
Yeah.
what life was like growing up in LA. So, she's a very intelligent person, and I don't know how that was for her. Hopefully it was enjoyable, but you'd have to ask her. But it would certainly have been unique.
um, yeah, I was excited to hear that one's coming up. So definitely looking forward to listening to that one. For people who are new to This Is Horror or just discovering This Is Horror, and I know that we've done this dance before, but it was a while ago, so the answer might be different. What are some specific episodes you might recommend for someone who's just starting to get to know This Is Horror?
Yeah, so the easy go-tos for me are Chuck Palahniuk and Dean Koontz. I mean, Chuck Palahniuk, chatting with him, that was a real milestone moment for me, as was with Dean Koontz. But
Mm-hmm.
perhaps because Chuck was first, it's like that was my first incredible milestone moment. But I think beyond those two obvious ones, if you're looking to feel really inspired, you could listen to any episode with Josh Malerman. I think
Yeah.
anytime I talk to him, I go away feeling good. I feel that I want to write more, and there's just this creative energy. There's an energy around Josh. He's almost an enigma. I don't want to make it. He's like kind of more than human, but he really inspires positivity and creativity. If you're to talk about someone who inspires positivity, you got to think about Jonathan Jans as well. So Josh is for really feeling inspired creatively, but if you want to go deep and get some incredible life lessons and come out of it a better person, if you maybe want to cry and just feel like emotionally overwhelmed, then the Jonathan Jans episodes, it's like we kind of, both me and Jonathan, we kind of bared ourselves raw in the different conversations that we've had, and we got really vulnerable. So I think those are incredible episodes too. But to be honest, if you're listening to this and you're a horror reader, just use the This Is Horror website, thisishorror.co.uk. Search for some of your favorite authors, and the chances are that we have an episode with them. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll have people ask me, are you ever going to talk to X, Y, and Z? And I've probably spoken to 2 out of the three. So just use the function, and I'm sure you'll find something good.
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation if you didn't say that, is first of all, just acknowledging in the 8 billion episodes that you've done, you've talked to practically everybody. And so there's a good chance, yeah, that if you're looking to hear an interview with someone, likely This Is Horror has talked to them. And if it's about a specific book, likely it's been for that release too. Cause like Paul Tremblay, you've talked to a number of times, and Stephen Graham Jones has been on a number of times and everything. So like, if there's, you can almost look at not just the people, but like maybe even like the release that you're interested in as well, depending on how prolific they are and when you guys had an opportunity to talk to them. So there's a lot to go through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, this one, let's see how this goes. What was a memorable or unexpected moment in your podcast? Not necessarily as part of the recording, but and honestly, it could just be like you talked to Chuck Palahniuk or something like that, because that's a big milestone, like you said. So, yeah, I'm just curious if you've got anything like that.
I love the timing of this conversation because, days ago we were talking to Sandy King Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, while that's happening and beforehand, that there's an awareness that she's married to John Carpenter.
Right.
But you don't really want to make the conversation about John. It's about Sandy. It's about her career. But also Sandy and John, their life intertwined. So it's going to come up. So I had this awareness. I also, before recording, she's not been on a lot of podcasts, but I found one that she'd been on. And occasionally in this interview she'd had, John Carpenter would say something in the background. And actually, I think Sandy herself, and knowing that John could be about in the house, it made me a little bit more nervous than I usually am, because John Carpenter is an icon. John Carpenter is someone I really admire. Now, luckily, I asked Bob after and he didn't know that I was a little bit nervous, because I rarely get nervous. I asked him, like, did I do okay? He's like, yeah, that was great. What are you talking about? I'm like, oh, I was a bit nervous. He's like, no, I didn't notice that at all. But the unexpected moment was, so early on, I could tell John was in the room with her because he would occasionally clear his throat. And there's times as well where I'm thinking, like, oh my God, I don't know if he's actively listening, but this is in the background. So it's like, oh no, there's enough of pressure here because of that. But there were a couple of unexpected moments. The first is that we took a break to end part one because John gets up and says, like, okay, let's order takeout. So we had to stop part one of the recording because John got hungry. But then during part two, there were a few moments where John just walked into the back. So he's on camera in the pod. He's just doing things.
Fantastic.
He's just getting on with his life. But as I said before, like, I am a great fan of John Carpenter. I am having to try so hard to just not smile, like ridiculous smile. And like Sandy's saying something quite serious at this point too, but it's like, it's fucking John Carpenter. There he is. He's just living his life, and to not be a fanboy, or to just not start smiling like a stoner overcome with ecstasy, that like John Carpenter's there. So that was a surreal and unexpected moment. And like I said, we've interviewed Chuck, we've interviewed Dean, both of who I'm big fans of. We interviewed Joe R. Lansdale, but I've always kept it professional. I've never started like fanboying out, but I wasn't expecting John Carpenter to walk into the background.
That's awesome.
On camera. Like, if I suppose, who shall we say? I mean, if if Guy Ritchie or David Lynch turns up in the background of your house, I mean, you'll probably be even more surprised than me.
Like, I've got a real Guy Ritchie infestation here that I'm having trouble with.
You know, I think the moment where I almost broke character, for want of better phrasing, is because it was unexpected. If I'm going to interview Guy Ritchie or David Lynch, then I'm prepared. I'm in the mindset. I was in the mindset to interview Sandy King Carpenter. I was not mentally prepared for John Carpenter to walk into the background.
Yep. Talking about bucket list guests, I would imagine Stephen King is someone that you would like to talk to. So maybe wind out of the sails of that one. But do you have a list? Do you have like, besides the obvious one? You can talk about anything. You want to talk about wanting to talk about Stephen King? That's cool. But do you have kind of like this is my list of people that I think would really, I'd love to have on?
You know, I thought up to a few days ago that Stephen King was the number one bucket list guest for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a conversation with Kev Harrison, and possibly he's the number two bucket list guest for me. So this came about because I was saying to Kev about talking to Sandy, and then I was saying about the incident with John Carpenter in the background. And he said he'd been having this discussion. So Kev had been having this discussion with David Moody recently. A load of people, including Dan Hauer, former co-host of This Is Horror, met up in the UK, and David Moody put forward the idea that John Carpenter was the director who had the greatest run of movies, kind of back to back of great movies of any existing director. So because Kev said that, I was thinking about it, and I thought that there's a pretty compelling case.
Yeah.
But actually, for me and for my subjective taste, this might piss off a lot of people because I know that he's hugely divisive, but I think Quentin Tarantino is the one who's had the best run of movies, because actually, for me, I don't think he's had a bad movie. And I can't say the same for John Carpenter. So there you go. He was considering maybe being on the show. He's now like, right, fuck you. not only have you, but you know, like the quality of Quentin Tarantino's movies are remarkable. And like Kev said, he could see my argument, and fair enough. And he was like, but also you're kind of the biggest Quentin Tarantino fan. And I thought, am I? Like, I didn't think of myself as that, or I didn't identify, but I thought, shit, maybe you're right. Maybe I am up there in terms of like Tarantino fans. It's like, I love everything that he's done.
Yeah.
I love listening to interviews with him. I loved his book. He's pretty obviously from readers of my fiction and influence, particularly on people who are reading, you know, things that I've done more recently, like House of Bad Memories. I love that dialogue heavy stuff and the fearlessness of going to some very bizarre places and even having these tangents. And to be honest, when anyone ever reviews me and they compare me to Quentin Tarantino, I take it as the greatest compliment. You know, I am one of the biggest fans of Quentin Tarantino. And then I thought, if somebody said to me, I could only have Stephen King or Quentin Tarantino on the show, I could never have the other, but I can choose right now, and I'm guaranteed to get one of them. Who do I choose? It's got to be Quentin Tarantino. I thought, wow. Oh shit, I'm his number one fan. So So Quentin Tarantino, he's not the normal fit for This Is Horror podcast. Stephen King is the obvious one to say, but for me personally, you could have anyone on the show. It's Quentin Tarantino. Stephen King, of course, I would love to speak to. He's number 2 now. And I'd love to speak to Haruki Murakami. I'd love to speak to Ryu Murakami, who did Piercing and Audition and Coin Locker Babies, many other great books. I'd love to talk to Ari Aster. I'd love to talk to Jordan Peele. These it's interesting now we're getting into film, but as I love books and films almost on a similar level, even though it's a book podcast. There's a lot of people that I'd like to talk to. Me and Bob would love to talk to Clive Barker. I know he's not in great health at the moment. But goodness, he is a master of horror that is perhaps underrated. He's obviously very admired, but it feels like, he should have the fame that Stephen King has, but he's not quite there in terms of, general not knowledge as to who he is. I'd also love to talk to Joe Hill. There's a lot of people that I want to talk to. Those are just a few.
So Quentin Tarantino, I know you're listening.
Yeah, he's a big fan of the Ark Party.
Oh God. Reach out to Michael, and that's how. I've said this so many times, but that's how David Duchovny connected with me. We reviewed his book, and on the episode, I said, if you want to talk to us, email. Gave the email, and the dude emailed.
That's just remarkable. David Lynch is another. And Bob would probably get upset at me if I didn't mention David Cronenberg. It's a big one for Bob.
That would be good. I mean, I like to hear that because I feel like when I crafted the what's a bucket list guest question, knowing I was talking to a bunch of horror book related folks, that I was worried that the only thing that anybody was going to say is Stephen King. And I have not gotten Stephen King much at all. Like, I think there's a kind of general implied, but the variety of bucket list guests is very encouraging, I think, based on what I was expecting to happen. So to kind of close out this conversation, the answer can be nothing, but what would be your goal for growing your podcast, or what is the next step for This Is Horror as a podcast, or what's coming in the future?
I think the main goal is to grow the podcast. And I feel that over the years, I've had these grandiose goals and these big numbers to shoot for. And that can be helpful, but I think in a way, it can be better to dial it back and to have these micro goals. So if you're at 160 reviews on Apple Podcast, why not get to 170 or even 161? If you're on 105 patrons, get to 106, because everybody counts. Everything is incremental. And I think if we just focus on these massive goals, then we can almost miss celebrating the small steps that we take along the way. I think for me, writing and podcasting are two of the most important things, and they kind of feed into the same thing for me. So year by year and decade by decade, I want to be getting better. I want to be putting out more books, And one thing that Josh Malerman said is the real making it is making the thing. So as long as you're creating, you're writing books, you're making podcasts, then you've already made it. That is the joy.
Mm-hmm.
If the pursuit itself can be where you're getting the satisfaction from, then you don't have to worry about external goals because you're already winning in merely doing it. So, I mean, obviously, I've got things, and as I say, I'm thinking about writing and podcasting as one rather than two separate things. So,
Right.
I've got things that I would like to do. You know, I'd like to be able to make enough money that I could comfortably support my family consistently on just podcasting and writing. Of course, I'd like to get a 5 and then a 6-figure advance for a book. Although, if a publisher is listening, you can start at 6-figure. We don't have to go
Right.
5, then 6. You can just jump in with 6. It'd be good to be published by some of these big publishers, but the caveat is not at the expense of compromising my values or compromising my art. So, you know, I want to make money if I can, but also I want to have fun. I want to make an impact. I want people to be able to say that I did something that meant something to them or it made their day better. And I think, you know, sometimes if we concentrate on the numbers too much, we can lose the heart or the spirit, and we don't want to do that. So the primary thing is to write good books, to make good podcasts, and to keep getting better and better. And if somebody leaves you a good review, if somebody says that you improved their day, you entertained them, or you helped them through something, then you have already won. So the real making it is making it. Just go out and make the thing. That's it.
That's mic drop on that. Michael, thank you for doing this, for joining this episode, but also for all of the making it that you've done over the years. I know that recognition is sometimes few and far between, but and I know that you and I have a lot of respect and admiration for each other, but like seriously, without you, the whole landscape of podcasting, talking about horror, would be an entirely different thing, and everybody is better for it. So, genuine thank you for all of the blood, sweat, and tears you've put into this over the years.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for being one of the inspirations and the influences on This Is Horror to begin with. So, you know, you talk about without me, you think the landscape would be different, but without you, then I don't even know if there would be a This Is Horror. So, you know, I wish that Booked Podcast and yourself and the ARC Party had more recognition. But I think, as we said, you know, you're making it. You've been making it for over a decade now, for longer than I have. And so that should be the reward. But I think, you know, bigger things are coming. I feel it. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep making it. You're making it.
Okay, thanks for sticking around and listening to my conversations with these wonderful folks. On my post on my Substack, on my website, I have a ton of information for you about these podcasts, where to listen, things like that. And then, as I mentioned before, the more extensive list of other podcasts I was not able to talk to you for this effort. If you want to support me, the best thing to do is when I talk to an author and I link to their book in my podcast notes, go and pre-order through that link. That's a bookshop.org link, and I get a little bit of money for every sale. That's the only way that money comes into this podcast, so any other expenses I have are coming out of my pocket. So it greatly helps me. It keeps you supporting independent booksellers, and pre-orders are so crucial to the success of a book. So When I talk to an author, I'm encouraging you to pre-order their book to help the success of the launch of their new book, because the more successful the launch of their new book is, the more likely they're going to be able to launch more books in the future. So that's how you can support me. And really, by supporting me, you're supporting the authors that you came to listen to. So it's a win-win. Plus, you get a book, so it's a win-win-win.